Thank you. This is amazing to see all these product people in Europe. I took a picture because I want to show my VC friends who don't believe me that this has happened in Europe. I love that. So actually, if you wouldn't mind a quick show of hands, because I thought it was very interesting to see where everybody's from, but I'm also interested in another slice of that, which is how many of you work at a company with, say, at least 100 employees or more? 100 employees, okay. How many, then I'm gonna assume the rest are less than 100, but how many of you that are less than 100 would consider yourselves as working at a startup? Okay, excellent. And of those of you working at a startup, can you leave your hand up if you would consider yourself one of the co-founders? Okay, that set right there is a really great sign for the future. I think if we would have done this a few years ago, it would have only been at big companies. And so it's interesting because, of course, there are some real differences between startup world and big company world. But I am a firm believer. There's a lot of people that are pretty defeatist out there that don't think you can innovate at a big company. I don't think that's true. It's harder, I'll confess to that. But I do definitely think we can do it. So I thought I would talk about, in general, I love to talk about what makes great products. I wanted to go a little further and talk about what makes those kind of products that are so great they could actually change the world, at least in terms of disrupt an industry, really change an industry. And a lot of our favorite products of the day would fit into that category. Let's see if this works. Yeah, well, maybe what's important just to know sort of where a lot of these opinions and experiences and honestly scars come from would be, I started as a developer for 10 years at HP. It was HP Labs, kind of the research lab at HP. What's interesting about that maybe is that about halfway through my time at HP, about 5 years in, I worked on this. That was, by the way, when PC software, it was all about the PC revolution. And about halfway through, after a big, more than a year effort, the result which was a completely failed product. After being frustrated, it was the first time actually I asked that question. So who decided we should do that product? Because I was just yet another engineer doing my best to build quality software. And the truth is, we all learn that lesson at some point, that it doesn't matter how great your engineers are if they're not given something worth building. And so I got very focused on that side. I continued to write software for several more years, but I also kind of took on that product role and got passionate about it. My lucky break, though, definitely was joining Netscape. Some of the earliest developers came from HP Labs, and it was amazing because that was really the birth of the internet. And I would say that many, if not most of the techniques we use to build products in the sort of PC Microsoft era fell down when it came to the internet. And Netscape was where we were all forced to deal with this. And I had an amazing opportunity to learn products from some amazing people like Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen and Eric Hahn, and people that are just fantastic at this. And we realized that there were some differences, some pretty fundamental differences. Anyway, I did stay, and eventually we were acquired by AOL, and then I got lucky because I got to know in Netscape through the developer program a co-founder, a great example of a visionary product leader, Pierre Omidyar, who was the co-founder of eBay and built the team there. But you're seeing experiences from platform and applications, and today I work with mostly consumer internet companies. But what I wanted to talk about here today was really some of the keys to creating disruptive, successful, pretty industry-changing products. I actually think these keys apply to all products, even if it's maybe you're assigned to a product that's fairly mature, but all you've been doing is kind of optimizing it, and you really want to make a difference with that product. I absolutely will argue these points for that as well. So, and it's hard, honestly, for me to limit it to 10 things. I feel like there's a lot of factors that matter. But the first one I would really put at the top of the list. And I hope, first of all, I actually hope all 10 of these are a little counterintuitive, and maybe some a lot counterintuitive. But This one, everybody sort of says and gives it lip service, but I mean this deeply, that to me it all starts with somebody. It's usually one of you with the hands remaining at the end there, a co-founder of a startup, usually starts there. Somebody who believes that the way you're doing it now, the way the world is doing it now is not so good, and that we could do something much better. And that passion for solving that problem, big problem. I'm definitely excluding here probably 80% of the startups that pitch to me usually for some money or for some advice. They're pitching a mobile app that's just a dumb little app that's maybe going to get 5 minutes of fame. And I keep saying that's not the point. What are you really trying to do here? If you've got an app that is going to really help put a vision in, make a vision come true, all right. But if it's just trying to get on the App Store a little higher, it's not going to do it. So I'm talking here about somebody who's really trying to do something. You believe in it. To me, that means it's at least going to take you 2 or 3 years. So when I say vision, I'm talking 2 or 3 years out. One of the other sort of dimensions to this is so many people think that, we do this, and actually it's true. There's a lot of people that start a company or join a product organization because they want to make a ton of money. That's right. They think it's all about making money. And it's funny because I also meet some people that think in Silicon Valley we don't worry enough about making money. But the truth is, I think both of them miss the point. I don't know a single really great company that was created to make a ton of money, or those that have just focused on the money. The money, we need the money. We need the money to fuel our product work, to fuel innovation. But the money is a consequence, it's not the purpose. And so when I honestly cannot point to a great company founder of a successful major product that was in it as a mercenary, but I can point to hundreds that did failed companies that way. They just did it. They thought, they fresh out of business school, they're going to head to Silicon Valley, make all this money. They come with their spreadsheets. It doesn't happen. They'll build anything. They don't care. A clear sign of that is if they're willing to pivot every week. If you hear pivot too much, it's usually a sign. This is what's going on. So the truth is we are tackling something big. There's a great quote from Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, which is, be very stubborn on vision, but be very flexible on details. That's because we don't give up. The companies I work with, we don't give up quickly on vision. We'll work on that for years. But we're very willing to try lots of different ways. The real point here, though, is that if you're a product leader, and really if you're in this room, you're a product leader at your company, I'm sure, your job is to really convey that passion and enthusiasm. It's got to be sincere. If you feel like you're stuck at on a product that is just going nowhere, or you have no interest in, I encourage you to talk to one of the many people in the audience today that have told me they're looking for product people. You should leave, because really, you should leave. Life is too short. You should work on a product that you're really passionate about. I actually believe there's even certainly consumer products, consumer electronics, games. It's not hard to get passionate about that. But I've found great people that are passionate even around things like enterprise ERP, because their motivation is they look at the world, they look at products like SAP and Oracle, and they say, this sucks, and we need to actually create something much, much better. You can be passionate about that too. Those people genuinely need help. So, all right, so that's number one. I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, and I think one of the biggest lessons that our industry learned, one of my favorite VCs, he's a relatively new VC, is Josh Koppelman. He's at First Round Capital, and he was actually the CEO of a cool startup called Half.com that we bought when I was at eBay. That's when I got to know him and his team. They're fantastic guys. He became a VC after that, and he told me that the biggest thing he learned is that every single business plan he sees is wrong. Every one. And that he doesn't care about that business plan. He knows it's going to be wrong. He cares about the team. He cares about the opportunity. What I think one of the biggest things we learned is that we learned there are many things we just can't know. The reason these business plans, the reason doing an ROI analysis, if you have to do a business case before you get funding for your project, I just listed maybe 4 things that are bad with that sentence. But let's say you have to do a business plan for your project. Yeah, what does it typically have? It's got some guess at how much money you're going to make. And of course, you don't know how much money you're going to make. We don't even know if people like it. The same opportunity could range from making nothing to changing the industry depending on how good it is. We have no clue about how much money we're going to make. Even more egregious to me is we have no clue how much it's going to cost. Yet we continue to go ask and pester our developers and tell us, how much is this going to cost? How long will this take to build? Even if it's an agile team, you find them saying, how long is this? Is this 3 months? Can we do it in 3 weeks? And of course, they look and say, you haven't even said anything about what we're supposed to build, you know? Most of the developers, the good ones will just say, go away. But some of them will actually just, they know how to play the game, so they'll make a number and say, here's the cost. And so we do these spreadsheets, and then you go to your executive team, and you have your dog and pony show, and it's all a big farce. And what we've learned is that we can't know. What we can't know is if this idea is any good. We just can't know that yet, and we can't know how expensive it's going to be until we actually know what the solution might be. So this is a fundamental. So to me, one of the biggest lessons is that we break this decision process about what to work on into 2 steps. The first decision is this something worth working on? Some people call this customer discovery or market discovery. Is this something worth working on? If we could get lucky enough to solve this in a good way, is there anybody out there who wants this? And hopefully, in my experience, doing customer discovery is a great thing to do. It's not that hard. It's actually very quick. You can do this well. You can validate whether the demand is there. The hard part is really the second question. The point here is first you decide if there's an opportunity there. Then you decide, can your team come up with a solution actually worth taking to market? Can you do that? That's product discovery. We're going to talk about product discovery in a minute. But the point here is know what you can't know. When you just have an idea, you can't know if that's actually going to be successful and how successful and if you can even do it. By the way, so don't put it on a product roadmap if you don't know if you should even build it. But that's, of course, what most teams do. All right, this one I hope is not surprising to people at this point in our industry, even though I would say of all the product teams I meet where there's a failed product, this is probably the single biggest reason. It's because people think they can learn what to build from our customers. And of course, we can't. In technology-based products especially, there's 2 fundamental reasons for this. Number one, our customers don't know what's possible. The technology is moving so quickly. It's incredibly hard even just to keep up, but that's our job. But our job is to know what's possible. Our customer, our user's job is not, and they don't know what's possible. Many of them think they know, but they don't. They define the world based on what they already understand we can do. So number one, they don't know what they want. Number 2, and I think this is even more profound because it applies not just to our customers, but to all of us. I argue all of us. It even applied to Steve Jobs, who I think was the greatest ever product guy. Even applied to him. In fact, of all the companies I've ever seen, the company that did more prototypes than anyone else I've personally been at is Apple. And it's because of this second point. It's because none of us, even Steve Jobs, knew what we wanted until after we saw it. Okay, after we saw it. So this whole idea of defining this big thing that we're going to then go build and launch is a problem. So Two big reasons, yeah, they don't know what's possible and they don't know what they want until after they see it, which is why that's not to say we don't talk to our customers. In fact, it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. The way we actually overcome this is we talk to a lot of customers. We'll talk more about that in product discovery. Probably a lot more than most of you have ever done. In fact, most teams I work with are talking to more customers in a week than often teams are over the course of a year. So I mean a lot of customers. But unlike a marketing mindset that thinks we can actually get the info from the customers, we're not asking them. We're actually testing on them. We're seeing if our ideas actually work. So that's huge. Okay, which leads to product discovery. I think for every technology-enabled product company, the main core competency needs to be product discovery. Product discovery is how we find minimum viable product. You've probably all heard the term MVP. These are the sets of techniques that we use. It would take me a solid day to go through all of my favorite techniques for product discovery. And what's great about our industry right now is the techniques are just pouring in. There's more and more innovation going on in the process itself. But the fundamentals of product discovery, here's the two rules of thumb that guide my work, at least, and I think should guide every product organization. Number one, first rule of thumb, at least 2/3 of our ideas are never going to work. So go in with that mindset. At least 2/3 are never going to work. Now, when I say never going to work, most likely because the customer could care less. They just don't care. That's not what they care about. We thought they'd love it and be all excited. They're not. Sometimes it's because it's so complicated, it's just not worth the trouble. They look at the trouble involved in setting this whole thing up and they look at the value and say, not worth it. That happens. Sometimes it's just too expensive in terms of time and money to build. So even though we could do it, it's just not worth it to us to do it. So go in with the assumption that at least 2/3, the teams I work with, I try to track what is the kill rate? What percentage of their ideas are they killing? I know that if they're not killing at least half the ideas, then what they're really doing is building and launching only to find out it doesn't work. Which is possible. The problem is that takes way too much time and costs way too much money. And the opportunity cost by spending all that time to build product software and launch it when we could have been building something worthwhile that was actually going to make money or do what we need, that's a huge crime. So rule of thumb number one, at least 2/3 of our ideas are not going to work. They're just not going to work out. The other third, this is the second rule of thumb. For the other third, it's going to take at least 3 or 4 iterations before it actually does what it needs to, until it does it well enough that it does what it needs to. Sometimes we get a little lucky and it happens faster. I wish that happened more. It's not. Sometimes it takes many more iterations to get it to where it needs to be. But our job in product discovery is to get through that cycle, separate the good ideas from the bad, and then take the good ideas and get them to success. Sometimes we say time to money, not time to market. Time to the point where it actually gets out there. Our job is to do that as fast as we possibly can. So let me just say, I remember the first times I came to the UK, I mean, not only were they not agile, it was as classic an entrenched waterfall as I've ever seen. I don't know how many of you are still doing those kind of processes of MRDs and PRDs and functional specs. If any of you even know what that stands for, that's a bad sign, right? Yeah. So if you are, then the problem, I mean, there's a million problems with that. But one of the fundamental problems, it takes so long to find out that was a big waste of time. And the fundamental tenet of lean startup sort of techniques, the fundamental approach in product discovery is, look, what's the fastest, cheapest way to find out if this idea is any good? Fastest, cheapest way. Building product software and launching it is considered the slowest, most expensive way to figure out if an idea is any good. So while some companies have, like Microsoft has so much money, they can afford to take, honestly, if you look at a typical Microsoft product, 3+ years to get to time to money. They can do that, and actually I applaud their persistence because they don't usually give up right away like a lot of companies. They'll give it maybe a year and then they say, dumb idea. But they don't give up easily. But that's not how, most of us do not have the wallets that Microsoft does. We have to be able to find that out, go through that 3-year learning period. We have to go through it in about 3 months. That's what most of us have for something significant. There's a little bit of runway, and we've got to find that. That's at a startup, it's seed funding. At a big company, it's sort of management patience. As soon as they run out of patience, we're done. So we have a race. The clock is ticking, and we need to figure out that solution, come up with a solution fast. So just to set the rhythm, actually I've been showing teams, there's a great little video on YouTube of the Nordstrom Innovation Lab. Some of you have, well, those that I work with, I think, have seen it, but some of you, many of you probably haven't. You should Google it. Take a look at that video. It's about a 15-minute video showing a week in the lives of a team doing product discovery of an iPad app. And the reason I like to show it, first of all, it was very well produced, but the reason I like to show it is it gives a great example of the rhythm and the pace of product discovery. So, and what that means for most of us, for most companies, that means at least an iteration a day. At least an iteration a day. So the whole notion of doing a sprint, say a 2-week sprint, even if it was just one sprint to test out an idea, and then that is an order of magnitude too slow. When product discovery, we're talking about faster, cheaper ways to do that test. Now, we have a number of techniques. Anybody that works with me hears me talk a lot about prototypes. User prototypes, both low fidelity and high fidelity prototypes. User prototypes are simulations. They're very fast. I saw one of our sponsors, one of your sponsors, Balsamiq, which I love Balsamiq. I don't know if anybody here from Balsamiq, but I love you if you are. It's a great example of a low fidelity user prototyping tool. I don't even ever touch paper anymore because that is such a, I love Balsamiq. But then there's high fidelity user prototyping tools. Lots of them. I won't plug their companies because they're not on the list there, but there are lots of high fidelity user prototyping tools. That space has exploded, especially on mobile, on tablets, it's exploded. Lots of great tools. And then we move into live data prototypes. A live data prototype is real code, but I want to emphasize, it's miles away from production code. A live data prototype is just enough code to send some traffic there, to get some data. Because a live data prototype is awesome for actually proving whether an idea actually works. But just empirically, in my experience, a live data prototype represents about 20 or 30% the cost of real code. So in other words, it doesn't have test automation, which we normally do. We don't do that for a live data prototype. It only has a few of the use cases, enough of the use cases that we're actually testing. It doesn't have much of the rest. It doesn't have performance work. It doesn't have scalability work. It doesn't have internationalization work. We haven't done SEO work. None of that stuff that we've got to do to build a product, we don't do. We just do enough so that we can send some traffic there and actually see how people really behave. Now, when it doesn't behave well, which happens a lot, it doesn't behave the way we hoped it would behave, then we do user tests, which is to complement the quantitative side of actually running I should have said live data prototype. The main way we test that is in an A/B test. But when things don't really behave, the A/B test, the data won't show us why they don't like it. It'll only confirm that they don't like it. So what we want to do is understand why they don't like it. So a huge critical technique in our bag of tricks is the user test, where we're really trying to answer 2 fundamental questions. First question, could they use it? Second question, and the real question, would they use it? And if they won't use it, why not? Why not? So that's what we're trying to learn in product discovery. there are many, many techniques. If you haven't read the book, The Lean Startup, you really ought to. It's a really excellent book, I think, and talks about a lot of these techniques. My blog, I share techniques on this constantly because this is really what we do. Again, fastest, cheapest way to validate our ideas. Okay, next key point. So many product organizations are really right out of the gate, they're in trouble because they think of product as projects. They think of it as a project. They say, all right, we believe we should do a mobile app. So they round up some people, usually an agency because they don't have anybody, but they round up some people and then they say, let's do 3 months, we're going to get this awesome app. And then they launch it. And then, of course, all the people are gone because now they're working on other stuff. This is not how things work. That's not how you innovate. It's not how we get to a great product. So we have to move away from that project thinking and instead move to the idea of dedicated product teams. A dedicated product team means, first of all, and maybe most important, it's cross-functional. Product, design, engineering. It's got all 3 of those competencies on the team. Second, if at all humanly possible, co-located teams. That means they're sitting right next to each other. It's one of the lowest tech but highest value things you can do, is literally put them right next to each other. I'm not saying on the same floor. I mean this far away, like these 2 guys, designer, product manager, right next to each other. That's what I mean. And further, they should be durable teams. That means that you don't just yank people from one to another. In order to do that, it means you don't scope a dedicated team around a project. You scope it around a domain or you scope it around a kind of user. You're giving them bigger scope of responsibility, but then you are asking them to do all the features, all the projects, all the redesigns, all of the performance work, all the bug fixes, all the optimizations for that area, for what they own. It's their product. It's more like a startup inside a company. So dedicated product teams. Now the other side of a dedicated product team is that you can just do a team and still give them a top-down roadmap that says these are the features we want you to do. Now I don't like that. I think it yields much worse results than the alternative, which is to give that team a set of outcomes that you're asking them to figure out. In other words, instead of telling them the features in a roadmap, you tell them the KPIs that they're being measured against, the key performance indicators. What is the result you're hoping to see? It might be a different conversion rate, a much better conversion rate. It might be figure out how to make money. It might be grow like crazy. Whatever it is, that scorecard, if you give that team the KPIs, at HP it used to be called MBO, managed by objectives, but if you give them these objectives, there's no guarantee that they will rise to the occasion, but it is much more likely that they will rise to the occasion because it's now their product. It's their product. Their job is to figure out the best way to do it. You'll still give them, or if you're, say, a CEO in the room, you'll still give them ideas. Lots of ideas come from everywhere. But the job of the team is to pick those ideas that are most promising and then actually build out the things that prove valuable in product discovery, and we're measured by the results. It's all about being measured by results. Okay. Yeah, honestly, despite Apple being the single most valuable company on the planet, people still, honestly, in my experience, don't get design. Most companies do not get design. I'm so happy that we're going to have, I'm anxious actually to hear all of the speakers when I read through, because so many of them bring that design competency and passion. To me, so many teams just don't get design. They think of design as look and feel. They think of it as polish. They think of it as putting a coat of paint on at the end. Or maybe they're coming from the old, in the UK used to call it IAs, information architecture. They're just thinking in terms of usability. That's all, just narrowly usability. And of course, design includes look and feel. Design includes usability, but it is so much more. Design is really, I mean, as Steve Jobs used to say, design is how it all works. It's really the whole experience. So design is something we don't add on later. Design is there from day one. In fact, most organizations I meet, when I first meet them, they get engineering, and they've usually got some form of product, but they often just don't get design. Even if they have design, it's an afterthought. And I try to explain to them that for most products, as hard as the engineering is, coming up with the right experience is usually even harder to do and even more critical to succeeding with the product. And that is a mindset, frankly, that just most teams have not got. Most executives have not got. They can't seem to explain or connect the dots between successful companies and their organization. So we have to focus on design. All right, so this leads to this notion. I couldn't be happier to see the discipline of product grow here in the UK and actually all over Europe. I usually come to Europe about once a quarter for a week or so, and I visit a number of teams. And so I've been doing that for quite a while, and I've been able to see it evolve. One of the things we have to be careful of is product starting to be, that sort of product manager is God, where they come down, this is what it must do. And then design, just make it, have you ever seen the product manager that hands the designer wireframes? That's what I mean. If you're doing that, stop doing that. Really not good. Yeah. So this is it. One designer in the room. Yep. Yeah. Products today, it's not some product manager that has this big epiphany. It's not how it works. Product, design, engineering, side by side. In fact, even though when I heard the demographics of the room, I'm not afraid to say, the little secret in product is the single biggest source of innovation consistently is not the product manager. Sorry, is not even the designer. The biggest source of innovation is typically the engineers, especially that lead engineer that's participating right there on product discovery. And the reason for that is because they best understand the technology and what's possible. So this is why I pull out what hair is remaining when I see a team that is not including their engineers in discovery. How often do you see that product manager and often with the designer kind of go off and work it out and say, here, build this. We say, I like to argue that if you're just using your developers to code, you're only getting about half their value. Okay, so there is a lot more value to be had there. So we need at least one developer, which usually a lead or senior developer, to be right there with us side by side. So product today is truly a collaboration between product, design, engineering. We know, most teams know why we need engineers. They code. They know why we need designers too, usually, but they don't often know what the product person brings to the table. This isn't so much the focus of this talk, but just to be clear, product manager, what do they bring to the party? First and foremost, they bring deep knowledge of the customer, deep knowledge of the user. Second, they bring deep knowledge of the data. They're the ones studying the data every single day. They bring deep knowledge of the industry and the trends and the market, and they bring deep knowledge of your business and how you actually make money. Yeah, this is what they bring to the party. The three together, combining that product person with design and engineering, that's how we do products today. All right. A lot of this, one of the things, we had a good discussion last night, and I hope nobody thinks, certainly after at least today, it's really not about process. A lot of people want to think it's about process. It's not actually about process. Teams use all kinds of processes. I don't even care what there's certain principles. We need rapid iteration, absolutely. We need frequent small releases. We need things like that. But as far as the process, honestly, it's mostly religion. What matters is the culture that you're putting in place. So what that says is, let's say the product manager and the designer disagree, which they if they're good people and they're doing their job, they will often disagree. Or they're just disagree with it. Probably the most common disagreement I see is engineering and design, because there's often very much a trade-off between the optimal experience and how expensive that's going to be to build out. So what do? In the good product culture, you don't have endless meetings. You don't have a bunch of escalations. You test. You just test. You run a test. Say, all right. Or maybe the product team, product design engineering, they're like, yes, this is great. But the CEO says, no, I don't like it. How many of you've all heard that? This is very common. So, bad teams might just roll over. Good teams say, all right, let's run a test. So we need to be able to run these tests very quick, and that leads back to product discovery. There's another common principle behind culture, which is data beats opinions. It's one of the mantras at Google, and I love that. But data beats opinions. The best CEO I ever worked for was actually Jim Barksdale. He was the CEO of Netscape, and he was an awesome CEO. And he used to say, look, if we're going to make this decision based on opinions, we're done. It's his decision. He's CEO. If we're going to make this decision based on data, he'll listen to anyone. And honestly, it completely changed how I worked, and I'm forever grateful to him for that. And so product culture is a collection of things, but it just means that you're going to move fast, you're going to constantly learn. You know, it's all about validated learning, where it's not just somebody's opinion, we're actually collecting evidence, and especially this idea about speed. I want to be careful. I'm not saying speed because you need to work more hours. Most teams I find, they're just not working smart. They're not validating quickest, fastest way. They're actually validating very slow, very expensive way. So it's just about working in this much more effective, quick. In the baseball terms, we love baseball in the US, it's about how many at-bats you get. We need as many at-bats as possible. And so anything we can do to get very fast in how we validate an idea we like. So again, it's not about process. All right, and the last point I'll make here is pivots. Now, I'm hesitant a little bit I used to talk about pivots all the time, but then we've really started to see a problem, like I alluded to before, where teams, they tend to just give up so quickly. It's like, well, man, they're giving up too early. I swiped, this was a recent Dilbert, and of course Dilbert is the true expert, I think, in all things product. But even if it is true, though, we say, I mentioned the Bezos quote that our job is to be stubborn on vision, but flexible on details. There is another quote, which is, we have to get good at distinguishing vision from illusion. Okay, sometimes it's just never going to happen. In fact, I had a really fun week this week because I got to catch up with a team that I love here in London, which is Mind Candy. You guys know Mind Candy? They're one of the really early success stories in London. But when I first met Michael, their CEO, it's like 5 years ago, he was in this sort of situation where some of you may have heard a game called Perplexity, and that was his first approach. And they gave it the good effort. It was a good game, but it was complicated, and the numbers at some point, you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at the growth, and you're seeing it's just not going to happen. And so he had to make that call. All startup founders, or just about all of them, have to do that. It's really a myth. It's hardly ever the case where their original idea is the one that turns out great. But he had to make that call. Today, Moshi Monsters has 60 million users. Okay? That's what happens. I mean, at a certain point, you have to pivot. They did a pivot. They're there. And honestly, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, PayPal, these were all pivots. They were all pivots. They didn't start. Groupon, fastest company to $1 billion, didn't start as group buying. It started as group giving. There's all kinds of pivots that go on. And my point here is that if you do this product discovery, First of all, the most common thing you find is that, okay, this is promising, but we need to iterate and get it better so that it actually does what we need. So the most common situation is you iterate. That's why I said you want to do those at least every day. Second common situation is you decide this is just not going to happen. So you discard that idea and go to the next idea. We've got lots of them. But sometimes when you go face to face with your users, you really understand, you just get very lucky and you realize, you know, if we relax, maybe loosen up our original vision a bit, maybe we change the target customer, maybe we change the problem we're trying to solve, maybe we change the business model, you realize we could have something here. That's a true pivot. We love when that happens. It doesn't happen as much as we wish, but when it happens, it's awesome. The sad thing is so many companies, and honestly so many product people, they have blinders on. It's very intentional. They are not interested in a pivot opportunity. They are just interested in, you know, running their idea into the ground. And so you need to know when, okay, maybe let's look at this opportunity. And pivots are awesome, so we love it when they happen. All right. So good. I think I did all right on time. I am going to be around all day, so I'd love to have some questions. We don't really have time for that in this session, and there will be a panel later. But there is a book, there is a blog, and there is my email if anybody wants to ask a question later. Anyway, I truly appreciate you guys all coming, and I definitely hope that was useful. Thanks very much.